Here's a tip for sharing books with your child. Create activities for your child based on the books you read together. Help your child make a kite with paper, sticks, string, and glue.
For additional reading tips and literacy information, visit www.reachoutandread.org.
Hi, I'm Mindi Reinheimer. I was asked to come here today to read for children's literacy. The book I brought with me was The Kite That Flew Too High. It's one of the 5 children's books that I've written and published. It was a very windy day. It was just the sort of day kites like best. Many children were in the park with their kites. There were as many different kinds of kites as there were children to fly them. Some children just wanted to watch their kites fly freely, while some of the older children wanted their kites to fly higher and do tricks. One particular kite had a nasty disposition. He sneered at the other kites as the boy prepared to toss him upward so he could begin his flight. "I will go higher than any of these other kites," he muttered to himself. "I'll show all of them who is best." And with that, a gust of wind hurled him upwards. Higher and higher he went. He could see kites above him and below him. "I must go higher," he thought. "Why doesn't he give me more string?" The wind was perfect. He could see so much more of the city. He began to tug at his string and dove left and then right, turning flips as he went. "Surely all this jerking will make him loosen my string and I'll go higher still." It worked. The boy was afraid his kite would get tangled with the others if he didn't let it go a little higher. He let the string unroll from the spool, and suddenly, without realizing it, the string let go, and with a look of horror, the boy realized his string wasn't knotted to the spool. The kite was so busy looking up and pulling to go higher, he didn't realize his string was not being held by the boy anymore. All at once, a gust grabbed the kite and pushed him to the side and finally up. But wait! He kept going up and up and up. Finally, he was beginning to realize something was wrong, and he was looking down. Yes, he was the highest kite, just like he wanted. And yes, he could see more of the city too. But he could also see that his owner no longer held his string and was running and crying and pointing up at him. What was going to happen now? At first the kite was afraid, but then he thought to himself, well, this may not be so bad after all. I'll be able to see everything now. I can not only leave this dreary park and all the other kites, but the city as well. Wow! I could leave the whole country. What wonderful adventures I could have. The kite was so busy congratulating himself on being free of the boy and finally being able to see everything at last that he didn't see the dark clouds coming at him. The clouds wore a scowl on their faces and looked to be not so nice. "Oh dear," said the kite when he finally looked their way, "they don't look very friendly." All at once the clouds were upon him, blowing him this way and that and pelting him with large raindrops. The kite was getting dizzy from all this twirling about. He couldn't see well and wasn't exactly sure in which direction he was headed. What was going to happen to him? Eventually the clouds blew past him and he was relieved. But there was something that felt funny. He looked down at himself and there it was, a small tear at the base of his frame, just where his tail was attached. "Ooh, this isn't good," he muttered to himself. He was beginning to miss the boy, and if he was honest with himself, he missed the other kites too. Sure, he was higher than any other kite, and he could see for miles, but he was alone and afraid, and he was beginning to think this wasn't what he wanted anymore. As he thought about this, he floated along, and a tear began to form in the corner of his eye. He began to wonder how he could ever get down. The sun was hot now that the clouds were gone, and his plastic body was hot. He wondered just how long he could stay up without melting. "I must find a way to get down," he thought to himself. "I want to go back to the park. I want the little boy to hold my string again, and I want to fly with the other kites." The more he thought about this, the more the tears rolled down his frame. He was beginning to get wet again, just like he had been when it was raining. Suddenly he felt a tug. He looked down and saw his string had become caught in some tree branches. All at once he realized he wasn't going higher anymore, and better yet, he wasn't even flying farther from the park because his string was caught in a tree. Just then he heard a yell. Some children had noticed him, and 2 of the boys were actually climbing the tree to get at his string. The kite felt a tear well up in his eye again, but it wasn't from fear this time. He was happy to have been found, and he made a silent promise to himself that he would never again have to fly higher or be better than the other kites. He had seen the city and been free of the string that connected him to the boy, but it hadn't been as much fun as he thought it would be. The boys finally reached the string and with some tugging and pulling loosened it from the grasp of the branch. They hooked the end of the string to a new spool one of the boys had in his pocket. They tossed the spool out of the tree and the force of the throw jerked the kite downward. "Wow!" yelled one of the boys. "It's my kite! The one that flew away this morning. We found him!" Sure enough, one of the boys who rescued the kite from the tree was the same boy who had bought him from the store in the first place. They put some tape on the tear the kite had gotten during that encounter with the not-so-friendly rain clouds and checked his string. "He's as good as new," shrieked the boy. "Let's fly our kites." The small group of children all took turns tossing their kites up in the wind, and soon the kites were all in the air fluttering quietly again. The kite looked around at all the others and smiled to himself. "This is much better," he thought, "much better indeed."